So a quick reminder, in the Heartmath introductory video, I pointed out that 70% of the time, those of us in the West are living in a state of survival, meaning we operate mostly with depleting emotions. For example, blame, gossip, impatience, anger, sadness, self-criticism, etc. And that each of these emotions are memorized or registered in two places: the cranial brain and the intrinsic cardiac nervous system, or the little brain in the heart. We can experience up to 10,000 different emotions, and depending on the category of emotion, a renewing or depleting emotion, we have a heart rhythm that is unique to each emotion. In this video, we are going to identify different types of stress, the effect stress has on our performance, and an introduction to the core science behind the Heartmath system. Stress can be defined as a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from demanding and sometimes uncertain circumstances. For example, the period since March 2020, the last year and a half, has been quite stressful. So stress is usually created when we cannot predict a future outcome, when we cannot control the situation, we feel there is a danger or perception that something is going to get worse in our lives. Most of us who live with stress spend most of our attention on our outer world, but it is our inner world that we need to nurse and support. There are three types of stress. There is a physical stress, a chemical stress, and an emotional stress. So physical stress is when we have had an injury, a fall or a trauma. Or a chemical stress, a flu, maybe a bacteria, virus, or toxins in our food and drink. Emotional stress can be a breakup, losing a job, lack of support, and all of these stress, whether it's a physical, chemical, or emotion, knock your brain and body out of balance or homeostasis. You may recall from high school biology that the body is regulated by a process of homeostasis, and that the definition of stress is when your brain and body are knocked out of homeostasis. The stress response is what your brain and body does to innately return itself back to order. So when you or any organism in nature begins to perceive a threat, they turn on a very primitive nervous system called our fight or flight nervous system. This is also called the sympathetic nervous system. So when alerted to danger, our body goes into survival mode. Stress hormones are activated, the heart and muscle groups are mobilized to adapt to the stress in the environment. Consequently, all energy that was directed towards maintaining and replenishing the body is now directed to fight, flight, or freeze. These chemicals knock our brain and body out of homeostasis. This primitive fight or flight nervous system, or sympathetic nervous system, responds in exactly the same way now as they did in early humans 2 million years ago. Once the threat is gone, the stress response begins to dissipate and the body will try to return to homeostasis after about 45 minutes, and the body will return to balance. So the sympathetic nervous system gears us up to fight, flight. It's like the accelerator in a car, and then there is a parasympathetic nervous system. Its job is to replenish, repair, and soothe the body. When these two nervous systems, the fight and flight sympathetic and the parasympathetic rest and digest systems, these two systems control 90% of our bodily functions. And they are the main nerves in which the messages from the brain are sent to the body, and also vice versa, from the brain back to the body back to the brain. And in order to maintain health and performance, there needs to be balance or homeostasis between these systems. We have a very primitive healing and survival system, and this survival part of our brain is constantly surveying for the unknown and potential danger. In our current culture, the majority of our threats are non-life threatening, but rather they are an assault on our mental, psychological and emotional well-being. Instead of the threat being a lion, it's work, study, relationships, finances, moving house, changing jobs, or the loss of a loved one. Perceived positive and negative emotions will affect your stress levels. It's when people experience too much stress and difficulty coping that stress becomes a problem, with elevated levels of cortisol in the body. So when I worked in interpreting market behavior and trading, I was looking and anticipating market activity on 8 screens for up to 12 plus hours daily. Together with the demands of the job, I developed severe insomnia, to the point where once I remember not sleeping for nearly 3 weeks. And then the anxiety kicked in, because I was worried about not sleeping and the effects it had on my work. So what was happening was that my fight and flight nervous system was so amped up after a day's work. My thoughts were not subsiding when I wanted to rest at night. What I now know is that what separates us humans from any other organism is that we have Mr. Neocortex. And within that part of our brain is the frontal lobe. And it gives us the ability to plan, think abstractly about a perceived event, or look objectively at events. For example, when a dog runs after a car, he does not think to himself, why am I running after this car? He just chases the car. We're the only organism that has a functional neocortex, which enables us to observe our thoughts and think abstractly about any event. But it also enables us to think about our problems even when we don't want to. So when I tried to lay my head down after a day's work, the mind started to anticipate losses and catastrophize over financial positions I had on overnight. So by the nature of my thinking, I began to turn on the stress response just by thought alone. But the thing is, these stress response chemicals like adrenaline and testosterone last in the system for up to 45 minutes, which turns into a vicious cycle of thinking and activating of these chemicals when we are stressed. So prolonged elevated levels of cortisol causes inflammation and disrupts the natural changes in the body's stress response system and cause disease. So by turning on this stress response just by thoughts alone means your thoughts can be degenerative and make you sick due to immune system suppression from an overstimulated fight or flight. But our thoughts can also be regenerative, heartfelt, which activates the chemicals like DHEA and acetylcholine, which renew and replenish our systems. In the next video, I will focus on understanding the science behind how these techniques enhance our performance, increase resilience, and reduce stress. Secondly, we will focus on the main difference between the Heartmath techniques and most commonly practiced breathing techniques and contemplative practices. If you found that this material has resonated with you, drop me a mail or telephone me on the contacts attached. Thank you.